Okay, thanks, Tim. So I'll be brief. I've got like 15 minutes and a ton of stuff to mention. What I will say is I'll do my best to put all this down into some kind of summary takeaway from this in the near future. So I'll touch on a couple things from each speaker and the panels. After Gary introduced us, Bob Bergman talked about OTT services in context. I took away from that really over the top is really nothing new. We have really good examples of how it's been in operation for years. The essential characteristics are independent operation, collaboration, and programmable services. We have really good examples of that. The network operator platforms, as well as they can close the gaps, based on what the over-the-top needs, they will be adding value. Carmelo Carlini mentioned about the history of mobile network operators and the time in which we were in the Garden of Eden and we kind of fell out of the Garden of Eden into the commodity space with the rise of apps. So, but there is a profitable balance in the way in which we can interoperate with over-the-top. For example, the device apps network efficiency work item, enabling end-to-end app-driven quality of service, for example, in LTE environments, by carefully defining and measuring services based upon KPIs and opening all that via APIs. An example would be the use of Internet of Things technologies like machine-to-machine to define smart spaces, as he described it, capabilities. Han Zeidweg talked about the challenges and opportunities in digital service. The fact that the digital economy is really for the network operator a local thing, that we have really growing demands on the digital economy, especially the local in new networks, but we need to bring about simple, convergent, and inclusive ways of serving those challenges. What would be helpful is a reference architecture. He described one with this digital open cloud. In the first panel, we had a number of really good questions related to what can OMA do, and how we can monetize apps when in fact, or APIs when in fact apps are essentially free. The cost recovery and providing differentiated service, bundling APIs for higher value, for example, creating ways of simplifying access to APIs were all mentioned. But we need broad adoption, broad implementation. So far we don't have a really good story on that. OMA APIs are being inhibited, though, by adoption by over-the-top, and we need to understand those inhibitors really clearly to be able to address them. With regard to the deployment of cloud, it will change the architecture of the way that OMA enablers are deployed and the way they expose their services through APIs. As far as who's going to take the next step, we have operators have to really work to instrument their networks and provide KPIs to demonstrate value, but at the same time the OTTs have to take a step as well to begin to leverage those capabilities. And the first question about the 2 years difference, it was all over the board, all the way from not very different to some maybe some earth-shaking changes. So we will see. Then Brian Mullen talked about the nature of de facto APIs or de facto platforms creating de facto standards, and the transition, for example, from the nature of applications and protocols from the closet, as he described it, to the cloud, and the transition of devices from specialized to generalized, payment and transportation being examples. In the interest of promoting adoption, there were 3 things that were mentioned. We have to focus on the developer experience. We have to focus on global connectivity, and consistency. And we have to demonstrate that we are open for business. Shannon Chevrier talked to us about the necessity for standard APIs. Are they really necessary? There is in the STP world, for example, especially, there is what I noted as essentially peer pressure and customer pressure to deploy things that work fast, whether or not they're standard. Customers aren't necessarily asking for standards. They're just asking for things that work. The important thing is that we are able to reuse these APIs across geography, business, different types of networks. And in the end, in reality, non-standard APIs are easy to use for STP vendors. So Michelle Berger talked to us about the transition from services to apps to smart things, the evolution that's going on right now, and how the intersection of value-driven and cost-driven business concerns are really the space in which a lot of opportunity exists. Leveraging things such as the real identity, the mobile identity, that exists between a user and their service provider versus fake identities, for example. Looking at the network as a cloud enabler, moving capabilities to the edge, and looking at the device as a service are all things that we could consider. Looking to create finished services that we can innovate upon through packaging of various things, and then reaching out to partners as members in an ecosystem. An interesting point he made was that the greatest value is in deep integration, not necessarily for operators, not necessarily in pursuing over-the-top solutions, as we've seen some in the market seek out. Frank Creed talked about the experience really in the coal mine, right? The difference between network APIs being simple for users in the end, but in fact over-the-top approaches are perhaps more personal and can have superior performance. I think this is something that OMA needs to think about. Why is that the case? In the end, standards can accelerate the adoption of APIs, but it's not a huge barrier for competent developer teams. And is in fact things being too easy, is that a good thing in the end? The need for carrier-grade API platforms was a key thing that he mentioned. We need KPIs, debuggability, reliability, performance, throttling effectiveness, and expertise and support teams. These are all very significant challenges. I'm not sure OMA can address too many of them, but some of them may be within our reach. So in the panel, we asked the question, do standards help or hurt app development? It was mentioned that in some cases they improve developer experience, but in other cases it was felt that norms of use don't require standards, typical users. But that also standards do help scalability once they are adopted. Why do de facto standards succeed? Time to market is a key driver of de facto standards. An adopted API can become a standard. And what can OMA do better to help APIs become standard? We have to evangelize the platform. We have to focus on the proper scope, and we don't want to solve solved problems. I think that was mentioned several times, in fact. We have to get out there and learn. We have to discover the needs of our customers, and we have to approach this in an agile way through reference implementations, get some experience, and get feedback quickly from customers. The One API Exchange can help by providing simplified ways to discover APIs, connect to them, and the fact that it provides one interface is actually a good thing. It's an exciting thing. And in terms of providing support for customers, we have to understand how the primitives, as it was described, of how services are built, how they relate to network functions, how those things relate to the specific service and the medium that we're delivering that service over. And we have to be sure that we can differentiate on SLAs so that we provide the proper service for the relationship we have with the customer. John Wilmus talked to us about the TM Forum's activities in the Open Digital program, about how customer expectations relate to products and services transitioning to experience and outcomes, B2B to peer-to-peer and B2C to machine-to-machine. We have a big transition underway in the way people look at services, and how real-time information is transitioning to right-time relevancy. This is going to cause changes in networks as they go from virtual to anonymous to immediate and app-aware, and changes in the stability of the relationship, which may not change much over the short term in terms of the relationship that mobile operators have as compared to the relationship that card vendors have. Rajiv Dalakia talked to us about the need to recognize people in real time, to focus on simple and effective means to do authentication, the fact that passwords are a huge fail with regard to customer experience. The solution is really to move these things into the cloud, to defragment all the methods, or at least to abstract all the various methods behind a common architecture that FIDO Alliance is working on. And the goal of reaching at some point a one-swipe authentication experience. Mark O'Neill talked to us about the evolution of web APIs from the 90s to now, how the difference in the way that apps use APIs, they get their data, and Internet of Things devices send the data. The relationship of these different types of aspects of the API usage, how they need protection, how we have to protect not only the code, but we have to protect the data, and we have to ensure that we have adequate access control over the APIs. And the role of OAuth, for example, and API gateways in providing that access control. In the next panel, we had a discussion about the smart city, how the scale in terms of I'm sorry, this was Tom talking from Silver Springs. Yes, he was talking about the scale changing from 5,000 per connection, 5,000 devices to 100 devices to one device, and the need for networks to address this shift in access between devices. Certainly a challenge, and something that will be addressed probably with virtualization as probably one of the key enablers. The Internet of Things will leverage the Internet protocols, but it needs a way to express the schema for objects that are being managed, et cetera. I mentioned the device management object tool that OMA has been working on is something we can think about. And then we had the last panel, which you just heard, and I didn't have a chance to summarize what the comments were on that, or pull out the key points. But overall, I think it was a really great session. I took a lot of really good ideas down on paper, and I'll try to summarize and express them in something that we can publish soon as takeaway from the workshop. Okay, thank you.